Alright, in this video we're going to be talking about a concept called Hardy-Weinberg Equilibrium. Hardy-Weinberg Equilibrium is a kind of a condition in which evolution is not occurring. So what does that Hardy-Weinberg Equilibrium? Well, first of all, it's based on these two guys, Hardy and Weinberg, or probably Weinberg is the correct pronunciation of it. I believe one of them was a physicist or mathematician, and the other one was in biology. And they came up with this concept of Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, which again is when a population is not evolving. And so what does that mean, or what conditions must be present in order for a population to not be evolving? And to make sure we understand what we mean by not evolving, we've kind of hinted at this in previous lectures. This is the idea that the genes of a population, or what we would call the population's gene pool, is not changing. None. Evolution acts upon phenotypes. Phenotypes are based in genetics, and so the gene pool will change over time along with the population if the phenotypes of a population are changing over time. And so there have to be conditions present in order for there to be no change, in order for there to be no selection pressure. A lot of times in a classroom setting, a class can come up with these 5 things just by thinking about the nature of natural selection. So here they are. A population has to be large. So if you think about when we talked about genetic drift acts on small populations. And so a large population is going to be less susceptible to that, because a change in a handful of individuals is going to represent a small percentage of the population as a whole. There has to be random mating. So what does random mating mean? That means that there's no reason why an individual in the population would choose one mate over another. There's no mate selection, is another way of thinking about it. There's no natural selection at all, meaning that all individuals in the population have equal access to resources. There's no competition. There's no reason why one individual is able to get resources better than another individual. There's no mutations. Another way of thinking about this would be probably no net mutations, meaning that there's no major change due to mutation in a population. Genes are not modified to the point where it allows for a phenotypic advantage, and that there's no migration, meaning that there's no gene flow, no migration into or out of a population, causing the change in that population to be significant. These conditions, as you can guess, are rarely met because the environments change, populations change, but they kind of provide what we would call like a null hypothesis, a starting point. Essentially, if change is occurring, then then we know that these conditions aren't being met, that one of these is happening. And so then how do we measure change in a population? Well, Hardy-Weinberg thought about this, and they gave us their equations. And so just before we talk about that, we need to talk about this idea of allele frequencies. Allele frequencies in a population can be calculated just by looking at the genotypes, right? So think about here we have 9 individuals, and so that represents 18 alleles. Where did I get that? There's 9 flowers, and each one has 2 alleles. 9 times 2 is 18. And so you can do just some quick math. What is the allele frequency of the recessive trait or the recessive allele? Well, out of 18, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 out of 18 is some number, 30% or so, a little bit less than that of the frequencies of alleles in that population is around that. And then of course, the big W, or the dominant allele, is going to be the opposite of that. If the recessive allele frequency is, I'm just going to have to use, because it's going to bother me. Let's see here. Calculate that. 5 divided by 18, so it's 27%, or 28% rounded up. And so then the frequency of dominant alleles in the population is going to be 72%, right? Just by using some simple math. So what can we do with these numbers? Well, this is the first of the equations that we have dealing with this. The percentage, so this is Hardy-Weinberg's problems, or Hardy-Weinberg's equations, and they said that the percentage of dominant alleles plus the percentage of recessive alleles in the population is equal to 1, which we just showed that in this here. 28% are recessive, or 0.28, and then 0.72 would be the dominant allele. 0.28 plus 0.72 equals 1. Easy enough. So there's the first equation. And if there's a change in that, right? Oh, nice. This is, if I had just known my own slideshow, I would have had this. So you see there's the first. Well, if you come back several generations later and that has changed, then there's an increase in the recessive allele in the population. And then what does that tell us about the what that recessive allele does to the fitness of those individuals? It increases their fitness. If more of them are surviving to the next generation and successfully reproducing, then for some reason being a white flower is better than being a purple flower in this population. That's a measured change. That's evolution. So we can go we can see a little step further with this though, because notice we have homozygous recessive, homozygous dominant, but we also have heterozygous. And so how can we use this number to get to an understanding of the percentage of those three types, homozygous recessive and dominant, and then heterozygous individuals? And that's what they gave us with this one. So understanding how this is derived, we have three types of individuals: homozygous dominant, recessive, and heterozygous. Homozygous dominant is p squared. Why is it p squared? Because the percentage of dominant alleles is p, right? And you have two of those here, so p times p is p squared. 2pq. PQ is big A, little a. Why 2? Well, because that can be either big A, little a, or flip that around, little a, big A. And so PQ plus PQ is 2PQ combined like terms. And so P squared plus 2PQ equals Q squared. Q squared is, again, the percentage of homozygous recessive. And so if you have this, you can figure out, and those are all equal to 1, which represents 100%. If you have these, you can figure out the number of individuals that have that in a population. And of course, if that number changes over time, you have evolution. All right. And so this is what this is showing you here. And I will say, I'll have another video where I will go over some problems like this, and you can use this. But in general, what you're trying to find in a population is, as long as you can discover the percentage of Q squared, then you typically, that's kind of your the way into the problem. Because why Q squared? Well, Q squared is always going to show a particular phenotype. And so if I were to tell you that 4 out of the 5 or 4 out of the 9 plants in a population were white, and that white was a recessive allele, you know that those 4 white individuals are little w, little w. You don't know the genotype of the 5 remaining purples. It could be big W, or big W, little w. And so what you don't want to do is try to solve an equation with p squared plus 2pq. You want to just isolate q squared, and then you can do the equation. Again, it's going to make more sense when I make a video with this sort of problem in it, and it'll also be in the same playlist, and so you can follow along with that.